Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Arthritis Action Podcast. My name is Marc, as always, your host, and today I'm joined once again, after a long time away from the podcast, Arthritis Action Service Manager and Dietitian, Martin Lau. How are you, Martin?
Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for having me back on your podcast again.
Sorry it's been so long. I mean, it's series one, I think, was the last time we had you. And considering we worked together, that's a really long time.
Well, I can't be hogging your airspace. People will get tired of me.
No, nonsense. Anyway, so like I said, it's been a while since you've been here, so we've probably got some new listeners since then, or some people who didn't listen to series one. So could you give us a little bit introduction? Like, who are you and what do you do for the charity?
Okay, I am the services manager for Arthritis Action. I'm also the charity's dietitian, and we also have a little, a little side hustle, so you could say. I've got a qualification in strength and conditioning. So at the moment, I am running the charity's, online exercise class, and my day to day is you're running, dietetic clinic, and at the same time, I am using my experience in SNC to help and support and also answer members or non-members questions relating to exercise to help with their arthritis.
And I might add that throughout like our online groups and stuff, they're always singing your praises. Anyone who does the exercise groups, anyone who does them is always saying how great they are.
I'm blushing at the moment.
Well, it's well deserved. Like I say, they all speak very highly of you. So if anyone does want to take part in those, they are a member benefit. So you do have to be a member to do so, but all the details are available on our website.
Thank you.
So today we're here to talk about resistance training and arthritis. So let's start very basic, actually, Martin, before we get going. Because a lot of people might not know exactly like what resistance training is. So what is resistance training?
Okay, resistance training, by definition, it is any exercise that causes the muscles to contract against an external load, mainly, and with the aim to increase in muscle growth, strength, power, and or endurance. Now, this external resistance can be your own body weight, water bottles, tins of beans, resistant bands, dumbbells, barbells, or any objects that make the muscles to contract. So you can have small children if you wanted to, lift them up and down, as long as you feel the muscles is working or, contracting really rapidly, then you know that is a form of resistant exercise.
Does body weight training come into that as well, or is that just a completely separate entity?
Absolutely. And I think a little bit further on, we will dive a little bit more into that side of things. And I think eventually, your body will starting to adapt to what you are doing. And I think the name of the game really is to provide a body with new stimulus so that it can adapt to the new environment, so that you are almost as though that you're getting one step ahead.
Excellent. So that leads me on to nicely to my next question. So why is it important when you have arthritis? Seeing as we're an arthritis podcast, let's get right down to it.
Yeah. Now I think a lot of the times, more importantly, when we look at osteoarthritis or OA, a lot of people tend to concentrate on the cartilage side of things because this is the main thing that they understand what osteoarthritis really is. They're wearing thin of the cartilage, but in fact, the whole complex, which including the bones, the ligaments, tendons, and the muscles, they all come into play. Now, it is sort of like, quite good to visualize that your muscles and tendons, they are, they're the scaffolding of your joint. And if you can increase the strength of this scaffolding, i.e., the muscles and the tendons, you will also increase the support around the joint, making it a lot more stable. And it can also help to increase the range of motion. And in fact, this is what people understood about the term flexibility, or this can make the joint a little bit more flexible. Now, I'm going to throw some big words around now, if I may.
Go for it.
There is a mechanism called the mechanotransduction. And you may ask, mechano what? Now, this is actually a process where mechanical signals is converted into biological processes by the body. And in the past, we understood that osteoarthritis is a wear and tear condition, but now this sort of like thrown into some new light. In fact, OA is not wear and tear, is wear and repair. And because the more that you sort of like make the muscles and all around the joint to work, that has got some ability to start repairing itself. Now, recent scientific studies have found that exercise, when it's performed regularly, is anti-inflammatory, and I think that this is this terminology can be quite useful to know the exact mechanisms. I have we still there are a lot for us to understand in relation to that, and there's also evidence to suggest that exercise could have a positive influence on the pain pathway as well. It is either at the local level or further up in the brain. It sort of like changes how our body start looking at persistent pain. Now, there's also go hand in hand that when we involve or engage, I mean, this is physical activity, as a broader term, that can have a psychological element that working your muscles could also make you feel good and support your well-being.
Excellent. I'm sold already, of course, but but let's help a few people out with a few extra bits then. So how can people start? What can they do to start with? Because like some people may have just been going either through a long period of inactivity, or may have just always been like quite sort of sedentary, or maybe just taking a break from exercising. What can people do to like get back into it or to get started even?
And again, it is quite common that if your joints hurt, you are less inclined to do anything sort of any movement at all. Now, something that I am a little bit more sort of like, wary is, please do not run before you can walk. And then if you haven't been, doing any form of exercises for a long period of time, start slow. And I think this is, really key piece of advice. A good starting point will be doing some movement snacks or some chair-based exercises to build up. And also, and when you first started out, there will be some post-exercise soreness, or your joint will hurt a lot more the next day. But please do not let this to deter you, or letting you to feel that, oh, the exercise is not working at all. We now understand that the pain doesn't equal to more damage, and and this is something that your body will turn around to you and say, hey, this is unusual movement. Why are you doing this? And because you have got some kind of injuries in that area, so I am going to get you to be a little bit more aware of what's going on. And this is where that pain literally means. It doesn't mean that, oh my God, your cartilage is going to be, thinning by about 1 centimeter, and it's not going to be like that. So, and then I do hear a lot of the times from patients and also from members that, the physiotherapist has given me some exercises, and, my knee really, really hurts afterwards. And I just felt that maybe it is doing more harm than good, so I stopped doing it. And I guess that the reassuring point that I'm going to put forward is, unless it is sharp pain, if it's sort of like a dull ache, it is what your body is trying to tell you to be a little bit more wary of. But the more of the movement that you're doing, the more that you're going to ask the brain to recognize that this is a safe movement. So, the initial sort of pain and discomfort, that is something that you are likely going to experience. Now, one of the key things that I also wanted to put across is our body is bioplastic and it will adapt to new stimulus. So, it will take time for your exercise program or exercise regime will take an effect. How long? Very difficult to say, but usually about from 6 to 12 weeks, you are likely going to see something happening, and because the body will start changing in accordance to what you are providing or the new stimulation. And that's sort of like similar to, how we are going to manage persistent pain as well. But overall, if you are being consistent and trust the process, it is likely going to work for you. Now, here at Arthritis Action, we do have our exercise continuum, and this is the 3 stages approach. The first one is called regain. And the second one is develop, and the final the final factor is adapt. So what we are likely going to support you, and we was going to, first of all, if you haven't done anything, so we'll put you into the regain phase, and then as you are becoming more and more accustomed to your exercise program. And we're also going to look at that now you have developed or start developing your new muscle strength. We're looking at putting you into the adaptation phase, which we're going to get you to do a little bit more work in terms of looking at the muscle power side of things. But all in all, at the present moment, especially from how we're supporting most of our members, they are all at the regain phase.
Definitely. So I have a quick question for you then as well, because one thing I find that a lot of people find, especially when they get things like physio exercises or like things like that, is when they get like a lot of difficulty at the start. How do you feel that warm-up should be introduced when you get physio exercises? Because that's not something they tend to give when you get like a list of physio exercises, but warming up can make a massive difference as to how you're going to sort of react to the exercises.
Yes, and I guess that if you are not used to moving your body in a certain way, I think stretching, can be really important, because muscles is just like elastic bands. It's just needed to elongate and shorten, for it to be function properly. So I guess that the warming up will be a form of stretching. But I think this is also I would start looking at things slightly differently here, because even though that I call everybody my athletes, there is also going to be a huge distinction between training high performance athletes and people that who are going to use exercise as a therapy to get back on their feet. So all in all, I think the warming up could be just simply doing something just to raise the heartbeat a little bit. So, for example, just marching on the spot can be quite a good one. That will be followed by some mobility or stretching movement, and then they can go straight into the exercises provided by the physios.
Great. So another question for you then. I'm full of questions. I'm just going to ask.
Oh, please do.
That's the whole point of this.
Yes, it is the whole purpose of this. Yes.
I don't know why I'm excusing asking you questions. It'd be a terrible podcast if I didn't ask you anything. But is it too late to start? Because we do a lot of our members like maybe haven't done anything, or maybe like people are kind of freshly retired or something like that. So they've been active throughout their job, but have never really engaged in exercise. Is it too late to kind of engage in resistance training?
Not at all. And I guess it is quite daunting, isn't it? you suddenly you've been told to start lifting those little weights about, and also some may sort of like start joining a gymnasium, and then when they walk in, and then they're just like, what am I doing?
They're daunting places. If you've never done anything like that, gyms
They
are
can be,
really,
yeah.
really strange. They're strange places if you've been training them for years, to be honest, as well. They're really odd places, gyms, full of characters of all
Oh,
types.
if you can sort of like film a documentary, I think this is going to be a really funny one. Yeah, so all kinds of all kinds of sort of cultures, within the the gym environment. It is,
Mm,
yeah. I mean, even for me, it's quite interesting. But anyway, um, you know, the notion of lose it if you don't use it can be applied to skeletal muscles. And you know, by by the age of over 50, we are all at risk of losing muscle strength and also lean body mass. So, to answer your question, definitely you can start at at any age. And if you have been inactive for such a long time, the chances are you have lost quite a lot of skeletal muscles. And this, similar stands. If you look at somebody who are in a weight management program who lost their body weight really quickly, chances are they also have lost quite a lot of their muscle mass as well. Now, I mean, this is a phenomenon called sarcopenia, and the prevalence of this condition in people with knee osteoarthritis was around 45%, and in rheumatoid arthritis, similar numbers, so that around 20 to 40% has been documented. So as you can see, people living with arthritis will have lost already lost a lot of their lean mass. And in terms of when you can start, definitely I've seen some older people in their 70s and 80s start lifting in my gym, and I think this is so like music to my ears.
love it. I love it.
Absolutely really nice to see. And I think the key point really is to find a fitness professional who understands
Mm.
arthritis. Mark, I know you have done some work in this area.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a former personal trainer and sports massage therapist myself, so I've done a little bit.
Good, good.
Don't make me talk about myself. I'm not the guest.
The tables have
This is
turned.
how everyone else feels. Cool. So, I mean, here's something I think some people will probably be, especially from like my experience, would have asked previously. How much do you need to do to benefit from it?
I can borrow some of the guidance from over the pond. Now, the American College of Sports Medicine and also the National Strength and Conditioning Association recommends about 2 to 3 times per week for people living with arthritis. And to quote our own physical activity guidelines, it does sort of like ask everyone, to engage in strength training twice weekly. The evidence sort of like suggests that there isn't any differences between sort of high or low intensity in resistance training. And to put it in context, low intensity is where the rate of perceived exertion is around 2 to 3. Now, what the rate of perceived exertion is a scale, from 1 to 10, and 10 being absolutely exhausting, that you can't catch your breath, and 1 being like, oh, this is really easy and I can do more of that.
Mm.
So to go back, and low intensity for the rate of perceived exertion, or RPE, is probably around 2 to 3, or even 15 to 20 repetitions. And a moderate intensity for resistance training is roughly about 4 to 6 on the RPE scale, or even 10 to 12 reps. There are also sort of like looking at getting in a little bit more sort of like, higher intensity, for people. And I do believe that if you have got somebody who is supervising you, i.e., you are working with a personal trainer, an occasional heavy set can be a nice little challenge, and I think this is where, what I've alluded earlier, that you can, your body is changeable. So if you can provide your body with some, extra stimulus, it can be a good thing. The other area that when working with people living with arthritis is to support them to develop muscle power. And this is one area that a lot of people tend not to talk about frequently. Now, what this means is, contracting your muscle really fast. So, for example, if you need to hop over a puddle of muddy water, or even a short sprint to catch the bus, and this is all involving how fast or how quickly that your muscle is contracting. And power, has a really major, functional purpose, and it is a physical quality, after muscular strength has been built.
Definitely. I think that you are absolutely right. That's something that rarely gets mentioned in sort of anything that you ever hear about, but you're absolutely right. It makes total sense. So how can people adjust their training? So let's change this now from like not necessarily a beginner, but like someone who's already training, someone who's already exercising. How can they then adjust that once they've been diagnosed with arthritis? What sort of things should they start to bear in mind?
To tell you the truth, I wouldn't change anything. I
Mm.
wouldn't change anything at all. I mean, if it is something that you enjoy doing, and after all, there are no best exercises for arthritis.
Mm.
But arthritis affects people differently. So if you're not sure, definitely discuss it with an exercise or a fitness professional to help with your training goals. Now, sometimes it's really difficult to try to answer this question, because if you are already doing something that you enjoy, it doesn't need to change that much. However, if you are doing something like really high impact, really high intensity exercise regime. So, for example, like CrossFit, that will be something that you will need to, step back and have a look and see whether, this is going to, continue to support your training goals. And, to be honest, if your arthritis is getting, a little bit, a little bit more sort of painful with a full range movement, there is no harm or shame in doing partial movement as well, because you are still going to get some stimulus to your muscles, and you are also not aggravating your pain. Now, unfortunately, as time goes on, you will, or you might have to, change the volume or even the intensity of some of your exercises. But I feel that, when that time comes, chatting with, a fitness professional will be a really good idea.
I think also being aware that, I mean, even if you didn't have arthritis throughout the whole of like your journey, if you're like lifting weights from like when you're young to when you're much older, you will have to adapt and change things no matter what.
Yes,
So I think it's
absolutely.
important not to hold on to like, oh, I can't do a clean and jerk anymore because of my back. Well, at some point you may have to stop doing that anyway. It doesn't mean you still can't train. You've just got to change how you do it to keep adapting with your body's needs.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then there are also, different Olympic lifting derivatives that you can try if you can't do the full clean and jerk. So I mean, the beauty of exercises is you can regress and you can also progress. And knowing the regression is not a horrible thing, can also help the longevity, of enjoying this type of exercises.
I mean, are there any types of resistance training that perhaps people should avoid? I mean, you've kind of already sort of like kind of answered this one, but like, is there anything which is just like, oh, that's kind of a dodgy area to be going into if you like, just say if you've got arthritis in your knees or your hips or something like that? Like, again, maybe don't start, Olympic lifting or joining a CrossFit gym. Is there anything like that, or is it literally just down to the individual?
There are no bad exercise.
Only exercise is done badly.
Yes, perfect. Yeah. It's just really, you just got to be honest with yourself. And then if you can't, achieve that full range, maybe it's time for you to reevaluate what you can and what you can't do. So, you can still be able to enjoy. And, I would say that, the other things that like more advanced, training modalities like the blood flow restriction, that needs to be done under supervision.
That's becoming quite popular these days. I've seen a lot of things are popping up on the internet about the benefent of that and why everyone should try it. Yeah.
Yeah, I have. I mean, I have actually, worked with a female runner that she's got a really bad knee osteoarthritis. I actually used BFR to help her to regain quite a lot of strength, so that she start running again. And I think this is for her, this is a massive thing because before she thought that no way in the world that I can start running again. And now, even though that she's not running marathons, which is something that she really enjoy, but she's managing 5-10Ks. And I think that we got to sort of like look at the whole picture. We may not be able to or you may not be able to get back into doing something that you enjoy to the fullest, but at least if you can do most of it, I guess that is a winner.
Definitely.
Yeah, but anyway, I completely diverge. And I guess that the key thing really is to find a regime that fits your functional needs. And I guess that what you got to look at is more of a functional, the day-to-day living type of using your training to support that. I mean, for example, building up your leg strength using multi-joint movement help with standing up, from a chair, or even, going upstairs, walking with, moderate, heavy sort of kettlebells help you to develop strength that you need to carry shopping. And remember, just don't jump, don't jump the levels, because if you are new to resistance training, there is no shortcut or even biohacking, involve that. And I guess that, to truly answer your question, you got to look at what you personal need in order to shape your resistance training program.
I think you touched on a really nice point there that I just wanted to reiterate on it, like about how transferable resistance training is just to your daily life. Because, like you say, like things like standing up, going shopping, playing with your kids or carrying your kids around, whatever it is, things like that are directly translatable from doing that work in like a gym or a home or wherever you do it. It can then have a very tangible effect on how you can socialize and how you can live your life and the things that you can do as well, rather than just getting, t-shirt muscles or something like that, which I think
beach muscles.
Yeah, resistance training, I think, often gets that bad rap in a way where sometimes it can be seen as a vain thing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It can be an incredibly like functional and valuable thing to have.
It is actually vastly important to transfer into your day-to-day living.
So what about recovery for this as well? Because as we've sort of already said, you get things like, the dreaded DOMS, or delayed onset of muscle soreness, for those who have no idea what I'm talking about. You get like DOMS, you get like, you'll feel a bit sore after training. What could people do to help, recover from some of this?
Oh, that is $1 million question.
We'll have to do a short version because, of course, I'm sure your answer could probably be about 6 days long. In the context of this conversation.
The abridged version. I guess that you got to understand that this is a normal process. Because this is something that your body hasn't seen it before. It's being extremely it's strange for your body to experience that sort of input, and that's why it start jumping up and down and go, what is going on? So the one way that we can look at it, sometimes some people will find that massage is good. Other times where just going for what we call the active recovery, like going for a walk or even going for a swim, will help to get your blood moving. So you will feel a little bit more sort of more manageable, so your joints can or muscles can start moving again. But I think the more important point is, do not start off really heavy. And I think this is where people will start getting some unmanageable DOMs from it. So start off really slow, allow your body to adapt, and in that way the post-exercise muscle soreness will be a lot less.
So this is a possibly contentious one. How do you feel about the saying "no pain, no gain"?
I absolutely hate it.
I thought that might be your answer. Explain why, though.
Yeah, because when we start experiencing, I mean, this is sort of like a macho, extremely sort of real masculine saying that, I can withstand pain, and then everything, I can sort of like go through this. But for people living with arthritis, I mean, this is not this is not a joking matter.
Yeah.
The main thing is we also need to, gauge where it's going to start hurting, because there will be a time where, when you wake up and it's going to be like, okay, I am actually planning, to do some, sit to stand, or just do some sort of like wall sit or do some squats. But, when you wake up, I just don't know what happened. My body just doesn't want to move. Or when you start moving, and even after the initial, period that that gelling started to subside, you are not seeing anything. I would sort of like, take it easy. Now, there's always going to be, a feeling that, I am in a lot of pain, so I am not going to move. I'm still going to encourage everyone that when they wake up, or when they experience the joint being extremely angry on the day, still trying to move, because by moving it, you are encouraging the whole system, and you're also reassuring again with the whole system that this is a safe movement. You don't need to overprotective about the whole situation. Now, I have learned this from a really excellent musculoskeletal physio, and he sort of like proposed something called the rule of 10, as in 10, the number 10.
Mm-hmm.
So what it actually entails is you have got your pain score, which is from 0 to 10. 0 meaning no pain at all. 10 means that you are excruciating in pain. And same thing, I'm going to bring back the RPE from your exercise intensity into the mix. So if your pain level is 8, so your RPE should be around about 2, and then so 8 plus 2, that's 10. So it doesn't mean that you are completely stop doing any movement at all, but you are going to do something. And in terms of the volume, I would say that on a particularly bad day, rather than doing sort of like 2 to 3 sets of everything, just do 1 set and then that, or or even sort of like doing half range rather than doing full range. So more movement that you are going to move your joint, the better that you are helping to calm the situation. And on days where you feel that, oh, okay, my pain score is about 3 or 4, let's say 4, and then I can bring my exercise intensity up to about 6. However, there's always going to be a caveat. But if you just experience a flare up, there's always going to be, a time where, when the storm is a little bit calmer, you may want to do things a little bit more. Now, unfortunately, we can't sort of like pinpoint what causes a flare up, but overexertion is, one of the main sort of stimulus for for flare. So also be very careful not to suddenly think, okay, everything is fine now. My pain level is 2. So Martin said that, yeah, I can rank my intensity up to 8. Now I would say that, give it a few days, of sort of like lowering, your training intensity. And then if everything is sort of like being calm, then you can, slowly increase your intensity. But other than that, sort of like, use it as a very loose sort of, guidance. I believe that it would be helpful.
People can also record a lot of this stuff as well to like kind of, if you're not sure how your body's going to react to some of this as well, keeping like an exercise diary can be really valuable, because
absolutely, yes,
through a little bit of detective work, you might find every time I do this one thing, it just sets me back for ages.
Yes, yep. Because you will get, you can backtrack and seeing what works for you and what doesn't.
Before I finally let you go, there is one thing I wanted to ask actually about. So we've talked about a lot of this is kind of like orientated around osteoarthritis. What about resistance training and things like rheumatoid arthritis? Is there any benefit there?
Definitely. But with rheumatoid arthritis, or even the inflammatory arthritis.
Yeah, so I should have said inflammatory arthritis.
And one got to be a little bit more mindful, and because being so like an autoimmune condition, any sort of extra sort of external loading may sometimes, I'm just saying may elicit a flare, and I guess that always start off very, very low to moderate intensity. That will be a good way to start. And then again, this is something that it is, you are on a journey, also learning about your condition as well. Listen to your body in relation to some telltale signs. Well, this is not saying that you are because you have got inflammatory arthritis, you can't lift heavy. No, this is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that initially, learn about all the telltale signs that your body is telling you, and sometimes with some of the more advanced medication, it will control your inflammation quite nicely, where you can then go by doing a lot more sort of high intensity stuff, but also sort of be aware that you won't be able to lift heavy all the time, and then now go into sort of like more sort of exercise periodization sort of things. You just got to sort of like work out your training plan according to how you feel, sometimes would be very useful.
Okay, great. So finally, any last words of wisdom or bits of advice you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Obviously, my bias will be, resistant training. But in fact, doing any form of physical activities is really important for people living with arthritis. Just find something that you enjoy doing, and also, don't neglect the fact that cardio or any cardiovascular training is important as well, because most people living with arthritis do have some kind of comorbidity, and especially people living with RA, they have got an increased risk of cardiovascular diseases. So keeping your heart and also lung healthy is a must.
Wonderfully said. Love it. Yeah. So if anyone wants any more information on this, please do visit our website, which is www.arthritisaction.org.uk. Got a whole library of seated exercises, loads of fact sheets, and loads more information that you can access from there. Plus, also remember, if you did join as a member, you can find out about that, where you can take advantage of Martin's exercise classes and a few other online offerings that we have via membership as well there. And if you have any questions or would like any more information, do feel free to email us, and you can do that at podcast@arthritisaction.org.uk. So thank you so much, Martin. As always, that's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
Great. Thanks, everyone, for listening. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.